We were deep in the Ozarks, just my brother and me. No one around for miles. We had set up camp on the edge of a clearing, tucked in between two hills. The trees were thick here, old pines mixed with oaks that reached high into the sky, blocking out the stars. We didn't see anyone else for miles. Not a single soul, just the woods around us, quiet and still. It was late, way later than we'd planned to be awake. But the night had felt peaceful, so we stayed up around the campfire, talking about old memories, sharing stories from when we were kids. We both enjoyed these trips. It was our way to get away from everything. No phones, no responsibilities, just the two of us and the woods. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound. At first, it was so faint, I thought it was just part of the night. Maybe a distant owl or the wind shifting the branches. But then I realized it wasn't that. It was a high-pitched sound, almost like static on a baby monitor. It wasn't loud enough to be clear, but it was there, like a soft buzzing in the background. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just my mind playing tricks on me in the dark. But then I heard my brother whispering from across the tent. "You hear that?" His voice was low, almost urgent. I froze for a second. He never spoke like that, and he didn't usually get freaked out by stuff like this. But the way he said it made my blood run a little colder. I unzipped the tent, just a little so I could hear better. The night was dead silent, except for that faint, static-like sound. It was hard to place, but it felt wrong, unnatural. It wasn't something that should be in the woods. I looked over at my brother, who had already pulled the zipper open on his side, listening intently. "Do you hear it?" he asked, barely above a whisper. I nodded, my mind racing. That wasn't just static. It wasn't just some weird animal noise. It was too human, too unnatural. I couldn't tell where it was coming from, but it was in the air, surrounding us. I could hear it more clearly now, like a low cry, but distorted, far away. A baby. It sounded like a baby crying. It was so soft at first, but as we both sat up in the tent, trying to listen, it grew louder, more distinct. I could almost feel it in my bones, like a pressure in the air. My brother and I didn't say a word for a long time. We both knew something was wrong, but neither of us wanted to admit it. I don't know why, but my first thought was that someone was lost out there, maybe a family in trouble, or some crazy hiker who'd gotten themselves stranded in the middle of the night. But even as that thought crossed my mind, I felt this gnawing suspicion that something wasn't right. The woods around us were so thick, and this sound didn't fit with anything you'd expect to hear out there. It didn't feel like a normal animal cry. It felt off. My brother spoke first. "What the hell is that?" I couldn't answer. I just stared into the dark woods, trying to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. But it was impossible. The trees were so thick, I couldn't see anything past a few feet. The noise, that high-pitched cry, bounced off the trees, spreading out in every direction. It was too far away to be close, but it was definitely in the woods, somewhere just beyond the edge of the clearing. It sounded like it was crying in pain, the kind of cry that would twist anyone's stomach. But at the same time, there was something wrong about it. The way it echoed, the way it almost seemed like it was distorted, like it was playing through a broken speaker. The static buzz mixed with the cry, making it hard to tell if it was real or just our minds making it worse. I glanced at my brother. He was tense, his face pale in the moonlight, eyes wide, staring into the dark. He didn't look scared, he looked confused, like he was trying to figure out if he was hearing what he thought he was hearing. Then the cry stopped, dead quiet, just like that. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I figured maybe it was a trick of the wind, or some animal that had been making weird noises. But then, just as I was starting to convince myself that it wasn't anything serious, the sound came back. Louder this time, clearer, more distinct. And it was closer. I felt my heart skip a beat. My brother's hand shot out, grabbing mine. He didn't say anything, but I could feel the tension in his grip. We both knew what that sound meant. It meant something was out there, something that shouldn't be. I didn't want to go out there, didn't want to find out what it was. But at the same time, I didn't want to just sit in the tent, hoping it would go away. "Do you think it's someone lost?" I finally whispered. He didn't answer at first. He just looked at me, his eyes wide, like he was processing everything. I don't know, but we should check, just to be sure. We didn't hesitate. We grabbed our flashlights and climbed out of the tent. The moment my boots hit the ground, I could feel the cold of the night creeping in. The woods around us were thick with mist, low and creeping, wrapping around the trees like it had a mind of its own. The air smelled damp, fresh, but heavy, like rain was coming. We didn't speak as we started walking toward the sound. I tried to convince myself it was just some wild animal, maybe a coyote or a fox. But no, it wasn't like that. It wasn't natural. The cry was too human, too desperate. We didn't get far. Maybe 50 yards out, we stopped. The static was still there, faint and distant, but the baby cry had stopped again. We stood there for a long time, listening, but it didn't come back. The only sound was the rustling of leaves in the trees and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. I don't know how long we stood there, but eventually, we both looked at each other and just knew. Whatever it wasn't worth finding. It didn't matter what was making that sound. We weren't going to stick around to find out. Without a word, we turned back toward the camp. I swear I could feel something watching us as we walked, though I didn't dare turn around. My brother kept glancing over his shoulder, his pace quickening, and I did the same. When we got back to the truck, we didn't talk. We climbed in, locked the doors, and just sat there in the dark, staring out at the woods. Neither of us knew what to say. All we knew was that whatever had been out there, we weren't going to be anywhere near it when the sun came up. We didn't sleep much. The truck felt like a safe enough barrier, but it wasn't enough to calm the feeling that had settled in my chest, that something was still out there, watching. By morning, the mist had mostly cleared, leaving the woods covered in dew. The sun was still low, casting long shadows across the clearing. We climbed out of the truck and set off into the woods to try to figure out what had happened. Maybe it was just some wild animal or someone with a broken radio. But the woods were quiet, too quiet. We searched for hours. We didn't talk much. We moved through the trees, looking for any sign of what had been out there. No tracks, no signs of a camp or any people. Just deep woods, thick trees, and a low mist that wouldn't seem to leave. We didn't find anything. No baby, no sound, just the same silence we'd found the night before. Eventually, we gave up. We packed up our gear, got in the truck, and drove out of there. We didn't talk much on the way home. What was there to say? We never told anyone about that night. Not in detail, anyway. Every time we think about it, it's like it happened to someone else, somewhere else. Not us. But I know what I heard, and so does my brother. We know that something was out there, and we're not sure if it's still out there. All we know for sure is that no one ever found anything out there. No missing people, no stories, just the woods, the mist, and that sound. Something that didn't belong. And that's the part that never really leaves. That there's no answer, nothing to explain it. Just a faint sound in the woods, and the feeling that something out there was waiting for us to turn around and come back. But we never did. It was supposed to be a quiet hike, just like the countless others we'd done in the past. My girlfriend and I had been hiking for a while now, our boots crunching through the dried leaves that covered the path. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, leaving the forest in near total darkness, with only the occasional break in the canopy offering a glimpse of the stars. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and pine needles, a familiar scent that usually calmed me. But tonight felt different. There was an unsettling stillness to the woods, as if something was watching, waiting. We were on our way to a primitive campsite deep in the state forest, an area we'd hiked to before, tucked far off the beaten path with no one around for miles. It was our escape, a place to get away from the noise of the world. But tonight, that calm seemed distant, replaced by an eerie feeling that hung in the air like a cloud we couldn't shake. We'd been walking for a couple of hours, our pace slow and steady, taking in the quiet of the woods. The only sound was the crunch of leaves beneath our feet, the occasional rustle in the trees, and our breathing. The temperature had dropped as we got deeper into the forest, and I could see my breath in the beam of my flashlight. I glanced over at my girlfriend, her face illuminated briefly by the light, her expression calm, though there was a hint of unease in her eyes. I knew she felt it too, the quiet, the tension. As we neared the clearing that would open up to our campsite, something caught my ear. At first, it was so faint I wasn't sure if I had imagined it. But then it came again, clearer this time. A faint, high-pitched crying sound, like a woman sobbing, barely audible over the rustling of the trees. I froze, feeling my heart rate quicken. It was far off, maybe 100 yards away from the trail off to the right. "Do you hear that?" I whispered, my voice low. She nodded, gripping her flashlight a little tighter. "Sounds like a woman crying." I thought about it for a moment. In all the times we'd been out here, I'd never heard anything like that before. This part of the forest was far from any roads or populated areas, and we hadn't passed another hiker all night. It was too remote for anyone to be out here, especially at this hour. Still, there was something about the sound that didn't sit right with me. I knew it was probably just some animal, but the way it sounded, so human, so distressing, made me hesitant to brush it off. I glanced at my girlfriend, unsure of what to do. I couldn't see much beyond the narrow beam of our flashlights, just dark shapes and shadows stretching into the night. The path ahead of us was clear, but the cry, it sounded like it was coming from the woods, from somewhere deep within the trees, hidden in the darkness. I turned to her. "What do you think? Should we check it out?" She hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Maybe someone needs help." I wasn't convinced. Something about the sound didn't seem right, but I couldn't just ignore it either. I knew the right thing was to check just in case. We weren't that far from the campsite anyway. We took a few cautious steps off the path, moving slowly toward where we thought the sound was coming from. The woods felt denser here, the trees closer together, their twisted branches blocking out most of the moonlight. The further we went, the more the air felt thick, as if it were pressing in on us from all sides. The crying stopped abruptly as we drew closer, and I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. It wasn't like a typical animal noise. This had sounded like a person. My gut told me to turn around, but I pushed the thought away. We were almost there, just a little further. Then my girlfriend called out, her voice carrying into the trees, "Hello!" The moment she spoke, the crying stopped. No more sobbing, no more sound at all, just dead silence. We stood there for a moment, frozen. My heart was hammering in my chest. The silence that followed was so complete, it felt unnatural. It was as though the whole forest had gone still, holding its breath. The only sound I could hear was the pounding of my own pulse in my ears. I held my flashlight steady, scanning the area in front of us. The beam of light barely cut through the darkness, showing me only shadowy shapes and shifting trees. Then we heard it, twigs snapping underfoot, slow, deliberate footsteps coming toward us. My stomach dropped. I couldn't see anyone, couldn't hear any voices, but there was something undeniably human about the sound. It wasn't the random scurrying of a squirrel or a deer. This was something different, something deliberate. My girlfriend's hand found mine, her grip tight and trembling. We both stood there, listening as the footsteps came closer, each one slower than the last, almost like whoever it was trying to sneak up on us. The forest felt oppressive, the air heavier, like it was closing in around us. Without a word, we both turned and ran. We didn't look back, didn't stop to see if anything, or anyone, was behind us. Our only goal was to get back to the trail, to get back to the relative safety of the open path. We pushed through the trees, our boots slamming into the ground, our breath coming in quick, panicked gasps. I could hear the sound of footsteps behind us, still slow, still following us, though they were getting closer with every passing second. The flashlight beam bounced wildly as we ran, illuminating nothing but the shifting trees, the rocks, the underbrush. My foot caught on something and I stumbled, but I quickly caught myself. I didn't dare stop. We had to keep moving, had to get out of there. Finally, we reached the trail again, and we didn't stop to catch our breath. We just kept running. The sound of the footsteps still followed us, but now I could feel the trail beneath my feet, could see the dim outline of the path through the trees. We kept running until we reached the small clearing where we had planned to set up camp. Without hesitation, we dropped our packs and made a beeline for the car. The night air was cold, biting at my skin, but I didn't care. We were too far from the woods now, too far from whatever it was that had been following us. We scrambled into the car, locking the doors behind us in a panic. I glanced out the windows, my eyes scanning the dark forest around us, but I saw nothing. We sat there in silence for a long time, neither of us saying a word. I could feel my heart still racing, the adrenaline still pumping through my veins. It was hard to think, hard to make sense of what had just happened. Had we been mistaken? Could it have been someone else out there, some other hiker or camper? But no one was supposed to be out there. The park rangers had told us it was off limits this time of year. No one else was supposed to be in that part of the forest. Eventually, my girlfriend broke the silence. "Do you think we should call someone?" I nodded. Felt like the right thing to do. At least we could report it, let them know what had happened. Maybe they could check the area, maybe find something that would explain it all. I pulled out my phone and dialed the ranger station, the call ringing a few times before someone picked up. I quickly explained everything. The crying, the footsteps, the strange silence. The ranger's voice was calm, but with a hint of confusion. "There shouldn't have been anyone out there," he said. "It's off limits. No one has a permit to camp there this time of year." I didn't know what to think. We'd both heard it, the crying, the footsteps, and there was no doubt that someone had been out there, following us. "You'll be fine," the ranger said. "But if you're still out there, I'd advise you not to go back in. I'll pass it along to the team, but there's nothing out there right now." We hung up, but neither of us felt reassured. We just sat there in the car, the night pressing in on us from all sides, the darkness beyond the windows seeming to close in tighter and tighter. We didn't speak much more that night. We stayed in the car, the doors locked, and we didn't move until morning. In the morning, we drove back to the ranger station to report the incident in person. The ranger seemed more concerned this time, though he didn't outright say anything had been wrong. He took down our details and promised to send someone out to investigate. We never returned to that campsite. The memory of that night, the sound of the crying, the footsteps that followed us. It stayed with us long after we left the forest. And though I can't explain what we heard or what was out there that night, I know one thing for sure: we weren't alone. We may never know who or what was following us, but there's a part of me that hopes we never find out. Some things are better left in the dark, where they belong. The air was crisp, the kind of sharp chill you only get in late fall. The kind that nips at your skin and makes you regret not packing that extra pair of gloves. I was backpacking solo through a national forest, about 5 miles off the main trail, a perfect spot for solitude. The forest was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels unnatural. No wildlife, no wind, nothing. I had been hiking for hours, and now, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the wilderness was all mine. Setting up camp was straightforward. I was used to it. Just me and my tent, the flicker of my camp stove as I boiled water for my dinner. I ate alone, enjoying the stillness of the forest around me. It was the kind of peaceful I craved, especially this time of year. The trees were bare, their branches stretching like bony fingers against the pale sky. The only sound was the occasional rustle of leaves as they were blown across the forest floor. I didn't expect to see anyone else. It was late fall, the season most people stayed home for, too cold for the casual hiker, too remote for comfort. I was here because I wanted that distance, the isolation. After dinner, I crawled into my sleeping bag, zipping up the tent with a sigh of contentment. There was something special about being out here, just me, surrounded by nothing but miles of forest. I settled in, listening to the quiet as I drifted off, lulled by the soft rhythm of my breath and the occasional crack of twigs in the distance. Around midnight, I woke up suddenly. I don't know what exactly disturbed my sleep. Maybe it was a shift in the wind or a strange feeling crawling up my spine, but something felt off. I lay there in the dark for a moment, straining my ears, listening. The forest, usually so still, now felt too quiet. Then, just as I was about to brush it off, I heard it. Footsteps. At first, I thought it was an animal, maybe a deer or a bear. But these footsteps weren't random. They were too deliberate, too close to my tent. The sounds were soft, but they were there. Person walking. My heart rate spiked. I tried to stay still, barely breathing, listening as the footsteps circled the tent. They weren't heavy, but they were unmistakably human. The crunch of dry leaves underfoot, the occasional snapping of a twig. My thoughts raced. What the hell? Was I hearing things? And then it happened. A voice. It was low, almost a whisper, but unmistakable. "Hey, my name. You awake?" I froze. My name. How did they know my name? My heart skipped a beat, pounding in my chest now. My name wasn't anywhere on my gear. I didn't have any ID outside the tent. I never told anyone where exactly I was going. So how the hell did they know? I held my breath, the only sound the hammering of my pulse in my ears. The footsteps continued, circling my tent once more, as if they were trying to get a better angle to look inside. I pressed myself into my sleeping bag, trying to make myself as small as possible, my body frozen in place. I didn't move, didn't make a sound. Couldn't. I was too scared. For what felt like an eternity, the footsteps continued, fading in and out, moving through the underbrush and then returning. My mind raced. Who was it? Was it another hiker? No, it didn't make sense. I hadn't seen anyone since I left the main trail, and I had been alone for hours. And why would someone be out here this late, in the middle of nowhere? I thought about reaching for my knife or my phone, but I didn't want to make a noise. I didn't want to give away my position. Eventually, after what felt like hours, the footsteps stopped. The silence returned. I waited, breath held, listening for any sign that they were still out there. Nothing. After a while, I allowed myself to breathe again, my lungs finally filling with air. But I didn't sleep. Not a wink. I lay there, staring at the tent ceiling, my mind running in circles. Who had been out there? How had they known my name? It didn't make sense. At first light, I didn't waste any time. I packed up quickly, stuffing my gear into my backpack, moving with a haste that I rarely felt in the woods. I was disoriented, rattled, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still out there, watching me. I wasn't sure if it was the footsteps or the voice or both, but something had shifted in me. The calm, peaceful forest I had arrived in now felt like a trap. I didn't take any time to make breakfast. I grabbed my pack and started hiking, retracing my steps back to the main trail. The forest around me was still, but now it felt different. Too quiet, almost oppressive. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing behind me, but there was never anyone there. The more I walked, the more I questioned myself. Had I imagined it? Had it been a dream, some trick of the wind? It didn't seem like it. The voice, the footsteps, they had been real. Too real. I made it back to the main trail in record time, my legs aching from the hurried pace, but I didn't stop. I just kept walking, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and fear. When I finally reached my car, I didn't waste any time getting in. I drove for hours, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few minutes, expecting to see someone following me. But there was no one. The forest had swallowed them up, and they were gone. I never did figure out who it was. Couldn't. And no matter how many times I went over the events in my mind, the questions remained unanswered. How had they known my name? Why had they been out there in the first place? And most importantly, what did they want? The logical part of me tells myself it was just some other hiker, but there's a part of me that knows better. The feeling in the pit of my stomach tells me it wasn't that simple. When I got home, I checked everything. My gear, my phone, my social media. No one had any idea where I was. I never told anyone the exact location of my camp. There was no record, no way for someone to find me. But somehow they did. I still hike, still backpack alone, but that night stays with me. Every time I set up camp, I double-check my surroundings, listen harder to the sounds of the forest. It's a little harder to trust the stillness now, knowing someone somewhere knows more than they should. And I still don't know who it was, or how they knew my name. The air was cool that evening as I set up camp near the Appalachian Trail. It had been a long day of hiking, the kind that leaves you feeling a bit weary but satisfied. I had walked about 15 miles, and the fire tower that I was camping near was a nice landmark. I'd heard rumors about it being abandoned, but it didn't bother me. I enjoyed the solitude of the woods. The surrounding forest was quiet. No wind, no sounds of animals stirring. Everything felt still, almost too still. It was the kind of stillness that makes you notice every little rustle of a leaf, every snap of a twig beneath your boots. I made a small fire, setting up my tent nearby. The sky had turned a soft orange as the sun dipped behind the trees, leaving behind a twilight that crept in slowly. My usual routine on nights like this was simple. Cook dinner, eat, enjoy the quiet, and then settle into the comfort of my tent for sleep. But that night, something was different. As the darkness grew thicker around me, I sat by the fire, poking at the embers. I could see the shape of the fire tower in the distance, its outline jagged against the night sky. It was a tall structure, the kind that looks like it's been left behind by time. I thought I saw something move up there, just a flash of shadow. But when I looked again, the tower stood empty. I shook my head, trying to clear the image. My mind had been playing tricks on me lately, and I was tired. The trail had a way of doing that to you, pulling at your nerves after long days of solitude. But then, just after the last light had faded from the sky, I heard it. A voice, clear as day, cut through the silence like a blade. "Come up here." The voice was soft, calm, almost friendly. A woman's voice, pleasant, inviting. I froze, a chill creeping down my spine. It was so distinct. Not a murmur carried by the wind, not a distant echo, but a voice. A real voice. It came from the direction of the fire tower. I looked up at the dark structure. Nothing. The tower stood still, silent. My eyes swept the area, scanning the trees around me, but there was no sign of anyone. I sat for a moment, trying to shake off the feeling that had suddenly settled in my chest. "Who's up there?" I called out, though my voice sounded small in the vastness of the woods. No answer. The only sound was the crackle of my fire. My heart thumped in my chest as I stood, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling. I glanced around again, but everything seemed as it should be. Still, empty. The night was eerily quiet, and then I heard it again. "Come up here." This time, the voice was clearer, louder. It felt as though it was coming from just above me, from the top of the fire tower. But the air was dead still. There was no wind to carry sound in strange ways, no reason for the voice to reach me so clearly. It was just there, hanging in the silence as though someone who had no reason to be there, was waiting for me. I didn't move. My stomach tightened, and I felt a coldness settle deep inside. It was too late to go investigating. It was too late to trust that voice. I sat back down, trying to convince myself it was nothing. A trick of the mind, fatigue setting in after a long hike. I poked at the fire, trying to push the thought from my head, but my mind kept drifting back to the voice. The silence that followed felt unbearable, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. The night dragged on, and I eventually crawled into my tent, unable to shake the feeling that someone, or something, was out there, waiting. I kept the flashlight next to me, just in case, but the light felt weak and useless against the vast darkness outside. I lay there, wide awake, listening to the sounds of the forest, straining to hear any other voices, but nothing came. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Every small sound seemed amplified. The rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs, the distant hoot of an owl. All of it felt like a reminder that I wasn't alone out here. And then there was that voice, echoing in my head. "Come up here." The next morning, I packed up camp quickly. The sun had barely broken the horizon when I was already on the move. I couldn't stay there any longer. I had to see it for myself. I had to know what was up there. I hiked up to the fire tower, the cold morning air biting at my face. The tower stood like a skeleton of rusted metal against the sky, its ladders and beams creaking in the wind. I climbed slowly, each step on the old metal treads sending a jolt through my body. The higher I went, the more the structure swayed, and I could hear the groan of the metal as it shifted under my weight. When I reached the top, I paused, looking out over the forest, the morning mist still clinging to the treetops. There was nothing up there, no signs of anyone, no footprints in the dirt, just a pile of rusted metal and old wood, the remnants of something long abandoned. I walked around the small platform, checking every corner, but it was empty. I stood there for a while, staring at the landscape below me, trying to make sense of what had happened the night before. The woods stretched out in every direction, quiet and still. There was no one around, no signs of anyone having been there recently. The only thing that remained was the memory of that voice. "Come up here." I descended the tower, my hands shaking slightly from the height and the cold. As I made my way back down to my camp, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That voice had been too clear, too distinct to just be a figment of my imagination. But I also couldn't find any explanation for it. There was no one around. I was completely alone. The rest of the day was uneventful. I hiked on, trying to push the thoughts of that voice from my mind, but it lingered, like an itch I couldn't scratch. That calm, friendly tone had been too real, too present. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I would never have gone up there, no matter what. The voice had been inviting, yes, but it had also been something else, something that didn't belong, something that had no reason to be there. I've hiked the Appalachian Trail alone many times, and I've spent nights in places much more isolated than that. But that night, near the abandoned fire tower, was different. There was a stillness to the air, a pressure in the silence that I can't explain. The voice that called to me wasn't a part of the woods. It wasn't a part of the trail. It was an intrusion, an anomaly in the quiet that I'll never fully understand. I haven't camped near that fire tower again. I've passed by it a few times since then, always giving it a wide berth. I'll never forget the voice, though. Every time I close my eyes, I can still hear it clear as day, that calm, friendly tone that told me to come up there. But I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me, or maybe there's something about that place, something I'll never fully understand. Either way, I've learned to trust my instincts in the woods. When something feels wrong, it usually is. And sometimes, the best thing you can do is listen to that quiet voice in your head telling you to walk away. I had been hunting in Idaho for several days, trying to get a good shot on a buck. It was early in the season, and the weather was still a bit unpredictable. The mornings were cold, but not freezing, just enough to make your breath hang in the air as you waited for the sun to rise. I had set up a blind in the woods the night before, hoping to catch something early. The quiet of the forest was always something that settled me, the way it seemed like the whole world was asleep. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, the sound of the wind rustling the leaves, and the occasional bird calling out from a distant tree. It was still dark when I settled into the blind that morning. The ground was damp under me, and I had to shift around a few times to get comfortable. The smell of pine and wet earth filled the air, and the cold seeped into my bones. I'd learned to enjoy the solitude. There was something about being out here, away from everything, that calmed my mind. No noise, no distractions, just the quiet of nature. But that morning, there was a different kind of stillness in the air, one that felt off. I wasn't thinking much of it at first. I was focused on staying still, my eyes scanning the dark tree line ahead of me. I could hear the crunch of leaves as something moved, probably a deer, or maybe a rabbit, but I didn't get my hopes up. It was too early to tell. I stayed perfectly still, waiting for the dawn to break and for the world to wake up around me. The first hint of light began to filter through the trees, painting everything in soft, gray hues. The forest slowly started to come to life. Birds were chirping in the distance, and I could hear the soft rustling of leaves as small animals went about their business. I was beginning to relax a little when I heard something that made my skin prickle. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps. They weren't heavy, like the clomp of a deer or an elk. They were lighter, softer. I held my breath, straining to hear more. The footsteps weren't fast. They didn't have the hurried pace of something skittering across the forest floor. They were calculated, almost like someone walking carefully, not wanting to make too much noise. I didn't move, keeping my body as still as possible in the blind. I told myself it was just a deer, maybe a doe trying to find her way through the trees. The thought of a deer calmed me, and I let out a small exhale, almost relieved. But then the footsteps stopped, right at the edge of the tree line, just inside the shadows where I couldn't see. The silence that followed was thick. I felt the tension in my muscles, the way my breath caught in my chest. I waited, listening. I didn't want to make a sound. I didn't want to give away my position just yet. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel something out there, something watching me. The air around me felt colder, like the temperature had dropped a few degrees. And then, from the shadows just beyond my line of sight, I heard a sound that sent a jolt of fear through my spine. It was a cough, but it wasn't the cough of a person who was sick. No, this cough sounded like something trying to clear its throat. It was ragged, rough, almost wet, like someone with a bad case of bronchitis, but deeper, heavier, almost unnatural. It echoed in the air, bouncing off the trees. I froze. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that sound wasn't right. "Hey, you all right?" I called out into the darkness, my voice cracking a little. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, a tight knot of unease building. My grip on my rifle tightened. No answer. I waited for a few seconds, hoping to hear a rustle or something to let me know it was just a deer or maybe a bear shuffling around. Nothing. Absolute silence. I could feel the weight of the air around me, and the quiet made my skin itch. My nerves were on edge, but I didn't want to make any sudden movements. I kept the rifle ready, eyes scanning the tree line, willing something, anything, to move so I could make sense of what was happening. The forest seemed to hold its breath with me. Then, from the shadows where I couldn't see, there was a shift. Something stood up. I don't know how it happened exactly, but it felt like everything around me shifted when it did. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't a person. It was too tall, too thin. The thing that stood up seemed to stretch impossibly high, its limbs too long, too unnatural. It wasn't a person. Couldn't be. I squinted, trying to make out more details, but the light was still too low. I could see its shape more clearly now. Tall, impossibly thin, its arms hanging long and loose at its sides. It didn't move like a person. It was stiff, jerky, like its joints didn't quite fit right. Took a slow step forward, and then another, its legs moving in a way that didn't seem quite natural, like something was wrong with its gait. It wasn't walking. It was lurching, like it was having trouble controlling its own limbs. The steps it took were deliberate, but they were almost awkward. It looked like something that wasn't meant to walk on two legs, something that shouldn't exist. I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. My gut twisted in a way I couldn't explain. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but I couldn't move. I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. Took another step and then paused. The thing was standing there, just inside the trees, its tall, thin body blocking the path between the trees. The only sound was the soft wind blowing through the leaves, but my heart was pounding in my chest, louder than anything around me. Then, without warning, it turned. It turned away from me, as if it knew I was there the whole time, as if it had been watching me from the start. It didn't run, it didn't hurry. It just turned and started walking away, its gait still wrong, still jerky, as it disappeared into the trees. I waited for what felt like an eternity, but I couldn't bring myself to look away. The thing was gone. The silence returned. The forest felt empty again, but it didn't feel like a calm emptiness. It was a stillness that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Couldn't. Finally, when the tension in my body became unbearable, I started to slowly back away. I didn't want to make a sound. but my heart was thundering in my ears, and I had to force myself to stay calm. My hands were shaking as I packed up my gear. I didn't care about the hunt anymore. I didn't care about the season. I didn't care about anything. I was done. The rest of the day was a blur. I packed up my blind, slung my rifle over my shoulder, and walked out of the woods. Every step felt like it took everything I had. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. I never went back to that spot for the rest of the season. I couldn't bring myself to. The image of that thing, whatever it was, haunted me every time I closed my eyes. I tried to rationalize it, tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light or my mind playing tricks on me. But I couldn't. I couldn't explain what I saw. And maybe that was the worst part, the not knowing. The feeling that something out there, something that shouldn't be, was watching me. I didn't return to that part of the woods again. Not that season. Not the next. I didn't even want to think about it. Some things, some experiences are better left unexplained. I started that hike early, sometime just after sunrise. The forest was wet from the night's rain, everything shining in that dull gray way the Pacific Northwest has when the clouds never lift. The trailhead was empty, no other cars around. That's how I liked it. Alone, quiet, just me and the trees. I'd picked this particular trail because it was remote and not too popular. A solid 15-mile loop with steady elevation gain, thick old growth all the way up, and then a ridgeline with views if the fog cleared. I didn't expect to see anyone. The first few miles went easy. It was all uphill, slow going, but my legs felt good. I stopped a few times to take pictures. Nothing special, just mossy logs, a big banana slug, a hollowed-out cedar big enough to crawl into. It smelled like damp earth, rotting wood, and pine needles. That deep forest smell that doesn't exist anywhere else. It was peaceful, the kind of place where you don't think about people. You think about birds you can't name and how your boots sound on gravel. You think about how still everything is. I made it to the ridge around noon. The trail leveled out and gave way to a narrow, open stretch where the trees thinned and the slope dropped off on both sides. To the west, I could see a wall of cloud rising up the valley. To the east, just more trees, dark and endless. I dropped my pack against a rock, sat on the edge, and pulled out my food. Just a peanut butter sandwich and some jerky. I was halfway through the sandwich when I saw it. It looked like a charred stump. That's all I thought at first. It was about 40 yards off trail, half hidden in the trees on the downhill side of the slope. Blackened, narrow, maybe 4 or 5 feet high. I didn't remember seeing it on the way up, but that didn't mean much. You see things different going uphill than you do downhill. Still, something about it bugged me. It wasn't just the fact that it was black. It was the shape. Too narrow at the base, too upright. Most stumps taper down or flare out where the roots spread. This one was just straight like a post, and it didn't blend in like stumps do. It stuck out, dark against the moss and ferns. I kept eating, but I kept looking at it. Every time I looked up, I felt like it had shifted a little. Not moved exactly, but somehow closer. Sounds stupid, but I even rubbed my eyes at one point. Tried to laugh at myself. I figured it was my imagination. Shadows can mess with your depth perception. Maybe it was a burned tree someone left standing. Maybe I just didn't see it this morning, but I couldn't shake the feeling. After a couple more bites, I stood up. My appetite was gone. I packed the rest of the sandwich, shouldered my bag, and kept walking. The trail dropped off the ridge and curved into thicker trees again. That helped a little. Once I couldn't see the thing anymore, I started to relax. The trail was still empty, and the forest grew quieter with every step. My boots sunk softly into the pine needles. The air was heavy with moisture. About 10 minutes later, I stopped to adjust my pack straps. The ridge was out of sight behind me now, and the slope had evened out a bit. I turned to look back. That's when I saw him. Not the stump. A man. Tall, thin, blackened clothes that looked burned or soaked in oil. He stood right where the stump had been, and the second I saw him, he stepped backward into the trees. Not fast, not running, just one step, like he didn't want to be seen but didn't care much if he was. I froze. I didn't even breathe for a second. My mind scrambled to explain what I'd just seen. Maybe it was a hiker. Maybe he had been sitting down, blending in somehow. But that didn't make sense. He wasn't carrying anything. No pack, no gear. Who hikes that far out without anything? I told myself to move. Keep going. Don't stop. So I did. I walked faster. Not quite running, but pushing my pace. Every few steps, I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing. The trail curved again, dropped into a darker section, and the canopy got thick enough that the light dimmed like dusk. My breath was coming too fast, and I tried to slow it down. I passed a creek and stopped to fill my bottle. I crouched low, used my filter, and tried to act like everything was normal. My hands were shaking. That's when I heard the branch snap. Behind me, maybe 30 feet off trail. I didn't turn around. I just finished with the bottle, screwed the cap on tight, and stood up. My knees were weak, but I forced myself to walk. Not fast, just steady, deliberate, like I didn't hear it, but I had. The trail stretched on ahead, winding down the mountain through thick second growth. I knew I had about 6 miles left. At my pace, maybe 2.5 hours. I told myself I could do it. Just keep moving. Don't stop. Don't look back. But I did. Another 10 minutes down the trail, I looked back again. Just a quick glance. And there he was. Further behind this time, maybe 60 feet. Still in the trees, just standing there. Watching. I couldn't see his face. His head was slightly lowered, shadowed by the hood of something. Maybe a jacket or just tangled hair. Couldn't tell. The clothes were still wrong. Burned, maybe. The texture was uneven, like parts of it had melted. He looked like something that had been in a fire and walked away from it. I moved faster after that. My body was running on instinct now. My pack bounced on my back. I tried to keep my steps quiet, but twigs cracked underfoot no matter what. The forest was too dense to leave the trail. I didn't want to get lost, didn't want to turn my back again either. Every time I glanced behind me, he was there. Sometimes closer, sometimes further. Always in the trees, never on the trail. Never running, just standing still, watching. I started to sweat, not from exertion, but fear. Cold sweat that made my shirt cling to my back. I knew I had to keep moving, but part of me wanted to run. Another part wanted to stop and hide. But there was nowhere to hide. The forest felt smaller now, claustrophobic, like the trees were pushing in. I passed an old logging road about 4 miles in. It was overgrown, but I remembered seeing it on the map. If I took it, I could shave a mile off the loop and get back to the service road faster. I hesitated for just a second, then turned off the trail. The logging road was rough. Piles of brush and saplings blocked the way in spots, and I had to scramble over them. I slipped twice, once landing hard on my knee, but I kept going. I didn't look back for a long time. I didn't want to see him again. Eventually, the road opened up slightly and started sloping downhill. I knew I was close to the trailhead, maybe half a mile. That's when I saw it. Boot prints, fresh, deep in the soft earth, leading the same direction I was going. The treads were wide, heavy. Not hiking boots, work boots maybe, the kind with steel toes. I looked at my own boots. Different pattern, different size. These prints were larger than mine, and newer. He had been here before me. I stopped walking, listened. The forest was silent, too silent. No birds, no wind, no distant rustle of squirrels or chipmunks. Just that thick, heavy silence pressing against my ears. I turned around and looked behind me. Empty trail. But I knew. He was close. Closer than before. I started walking again, faster now. Almost jogging. My legs burned. My heart pounded. And my mouth was dry. I didn't stop. Didn't look back again. When I saw the edge of the trailhead parking lot through the trees, I almost cried. My car was still there. No other vehicles. I sprinted the last 100 yards, ripped the keys from my hip belt, and got inside, slamming the door behind me. I locked it, sat there, hands shaking on the wheel. Then I saw movement. Across the lot, where the trail began again, he stepped out of the woods, still just standing, watching. I started the car, peeled out of there without looking back again. I didn't call anyone, didn't tell anyone. What would I even say? There's a man in the woods, standing around watching people? But it was more than that. It was the way he followed, not chasing, just there, always there. And the worst part? The way he looked at me, like he was trying to remember something, or like he already knew me. We'd been planning the trip for a few months. It was going to be 4 nights, 5 days, in one of the most remote parts of national forest I've ever stepped foot in. No marked trails, no service roads, no ranger stations within miles. Just trees, creeks, rocks, and the 3 of us, me, Kyle, and Brent. We'd met in college, stayed close through the years, and done a handful of trips like this before, but never quite this deep. The idea was to really disconnect, no cell reception, no satellite phones, just topographic maps, compasses, and a couple of decent GPS units we rarely used unless things got tricky. We all packed heavy, extra supplies, first aid, the usual survival stuff. We were smart about it, or at least we thought we were. The first couple days were peaceful, the kind of quiet you only get deep in the woods, where the wind talks through the trees and your ears start picking up sounds you forget exist back in town. Chipmunks rustling leaves, distant owl calls, the slow drip of moisture off mossy branches. The terrain was rough, nothing flat about it, and we had to work for every mile. Thick brush in some places and slopes that made your calves scream. But we were in it for that. Every step in meant one more step away from roads, from people, from everything. We'd set up our second camp along the edge of a narrow creek that curved through a shallow ravine. No signs of people. No boot prints, no fire rings, not even any old trash tucked into tree roots like you sometimes find even in the backcountry. Just untouched forest. That night, we boiled water from the creek, ate freeze-dried chili out of our little pouches, and sat by a small fire till we were tired enough to crawl into the tent. Just one tent between us, a big 3-person one with plenty of room. We'd done it that way plenty of times before, safer, warmer, easier. I always sleep light in the woods. Sounds don't scare me much, but I've learned to wake up when they change. Wind shifts, branches snap, animals move. It's part of it. And that night, I woke up to cold air on my face. Not just the usual cold that comes in the early morning, but a draft, a moving breeze. I shifted in my sleeping bag and noticed it wasn't fully zipped up. I always zip it up. Always. I sat up and saw it. The tent door, unzipped halfway down. Just hanging there, still as anything, but wide open to the dark. First thought, someone got up to pee and left it open. But when I looked around in the dim light, moonlight was barely getting through the trees. I could see both Kyle and Brent, curled up in their bags, breathing slow and steady. I watched for a while just to be sure, but neither moved. I even listened for the sound of someone walking around outside, or peeing nearby. Nothing. I felt that prickly feeling in my chest, like my body was catching on before my brain could. I looked over at our bear bags. We'd strung them up earlier, way up on a high branch about 30 yards off, tied off to a tree trunk, still hanging, swaying gently, untouched. And I mean untouched. No scratch marks, no loose rope, nothing on the ground around them. I grabbed my headlamp, clicked it on, and looked around. No tracks, not even ours. Leaf litter was so thick, the ground didn't really hold prints. But there was no sign anything had pushed its way through the brush around the tent. No bent branches, no claw marks, no scuffed bark, just forest. I zipped the tent back up and lay back down, but I didn't sleep. Not really. I kept listening. After maybe an hour, Kyle stirred, then Brent. I didn't tell them right away, just sat there, pretending I'd just woken up, trying not to seem weird. But I could tell they felt it too. That sense that something was off. We ended up staying awake in shifts the rest of the night. One guy kept watch while the other 2 dozed. Not much sleep for any of us. Morning came slowly, as it always does out there. Light creeping through trees like it's scared of the dark too. I felt better when I stood up, moved around. Things always seem less creepy in daylight. I got to work packing up gear while Brent went off to check the bear bags and Kyle stretched his legs. He walked over to the tent, probably checking for any tears or leaks. Then he paused. He crouched down, looking at the zipper. I saw him tilt his head, reach out. Then he looked over at me. "You didn't do this?" The tent was unzipped again. Same way halfway down. Clean line. No damage. Just undone. This time we didn't laugh it off. Brent came over and looked too. None of us had touched it. Not since I zipped it up before dawn. We'd all been busy making breakfast or packing gear, and we hadn't seen or heard a thing. But there it was, unfastened, like it had been opened deliberately. We didn't know what to do with that. We just zipped it again, double-checked our stuff, and pushed forward. We moved camps that day, hiked 6 or 7 miles deeper into the woods. None of us said it out loud, but we were putting distance between us and whatever that had been. The third campsite was a little higher up, with more wind, fewer trees, more rocks. I felt better about that. More visibility. That night, we rigged a string with bells around the tent. We'd brought them to use for bear warnings, but never needed them. We hung them up, tied them to sticks, and made sure anything that got close would make noise. We even placed some dry branches around the site to make snapping sounds if stepped on. That night passed without a hitch. The bells didn't jingle. No weird zippers. We started to think maybe the first night was just a fluke. Maybe a strong wind worked it loose. Maybe I'd imagined it. But I knew what I saw. Still, I wanted to believe it was nothing. The next night, fourth night out, we found a sheltered little hollow beneath a cliff face. Looked like a place animals might bed down, but we didn't see any scat or bones or nests. Still, we all felt a little hesitant. Maybe it was the way the wind didn't quite make it in there. Too quiet, too still. We put the bells up again, reinforced the fire ring. This time, I took first shift for watch. Sat there with my little headlamp on low, watching the trees, listening. Around midnight, I heard a sound. Not from the forest, but from behind me, from the tent. Just a faint little zip. I turned instantly, light snapping toward the noise. Nothing. The zipper was exactly where it should be. Fully closed, tight, no movement. The others stirred inside, woken by the sudden beam of my light. I didn't say anything, just sat there, heart racing. Waited. Nothing else happened. My shift ended, Brent took over, and I lay down. I must have fallen asleep at some point because I jolted awake to sunlight. Morning again. I sat up, stretched, checked the zipper. Still shut. We packed camp slower that day, kind of drained. I think we were all trying to decide if we were imagining it, if this was just nerves or sleep deprivation or something else playing with our heads. I mean, what kind of person would come way out here, in the middle of nowhere, just to unzip a tent and leave? We'd seen no one. Not a single hiker, hunter, or even distant figure. And it wasn't hunting season. No motor sounds, no dogs, nothing. Not even planes overhead. We made the final camp near the trailhead we'd started from. Still far enough from the road to avoid casual campers, but close enough that we knew we'd be hiking out in the morning. That night, we didn't even put up the bells. We were too tired. Just wanted it to be over. I woke up again. Not to cold air this time, but to silence. A deep, pressing kind of silence that felt like something had taken the air out of the forest. I rolled over. The tent flap unzipped. Again. This time all the way down. I looked around. Moonlight. Just enough to see the outline of the trees through the mesh. Just enough to see both of my friends. Still asleep. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I just lay there, breathing slow, trying not to let my breath shake. I listened. No wind. No bugs. Just nothing. Then I heard it. A soft, barely there sound. Footsteps. Not crunching or crashing. Just the gentle scuff of something brushing against leaves. Moving away from the tent. Slow. Measured. One step. Another. Then nothing. I waited a long time before I reached for the zipper and pulled it shut. In the morning, I told the others. This time, I couldn't keep it to myself. We checked everything again. Bear bags still there. Packs untouched. Nothing stolen. Nothing broken. Just the tent opened in the night. Again. When we got to the car, the first thing we did was check for signs anyone had followed us. Nothing. No notes, no weird symbols, no misplaced gear. But later that week, back in town, Brent noticed something weird while going through his pack. His water filter bag, the one with the gravity feed tube, had been packed dry, looped up, and sealed. He found it unrolled. Not just loosened, but completely uncoiled, and the cap resting gently on top of his clothes. Not spilled, not broken, just removed. That was it. Nothing dramatic. No ghost stories. No big reveal. But it left this deep pit in my stomach that still hasn't gone away. I don't know what happened out there. I don't know if it was a